Now, despite the fact that the game is called Europa Universalis 5, we do have other parts of the world, and today we're going to be seeing what exactly the Maghreb is going to look like. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a historical background to the Maghreb as well in this particular time period, and I'm going to talk about some of the gripes that I have with this map, because there are some things that are not necessarily accurate, and I'm not sure why. So we're going to be asking these questions, of course. Now, this was posted by Pavia himself. He mentions that after the nightmarish maps of last week, we're showing a much less fragmented region this week, the Maghreb. He's making a reference to the HRE and the Germanic areas in general from last week. He's saying that we're showing two versions of the country map, one without colored wasteland and another with them colored. Please take into account that some work still needs to be done regarding the coloring of the corridors. Only 4 new countries are to be shown this week, as Fezzan already appeared some weeks ago. This is first. There are dynamic keys for them similar to the Mamelukes, so their full name in the game is Marinid Sultanate of Morocco, Zionid Sultanate of Tlemcen, and Hafsid Sultanate of Tunis. Tripoli starts with a random ruler, as we weren't able to find which was the reigning dynasty in 1337. Actually, Tripoli was ruled by Lord Skibidiboo of Skibidons. Everybody knows this. I expected more from you guys. You should have known that. The reason they're called the Marinid Sultanate, Zionid Sultanate, Hafsid, and so on is because the countries themselves were not necessarily Morocco, Tunis, Tlemcen. They were more the Marinids, the Hafsids, the Zionids. They were basically a grouping of people held together by specific dynasties, namely the Hafsids, Zionids, Marinids in 1337. You wouldn't have like, oh, you guys are the Hafsids, you're completely different from the Zionids. No, it would be all basically the same people, probably speaking the exact same dialect as well. Only difference would be which ruling family owns everybody and which doesn't, right? Where the border between the one family's land starts and where the other one begins, right? Stops and begins. Now, if we look at the maps themselves, the way that they did the corridors between North Africa and Sub-Sahara, which is, by the way, going to be the theme for next week's dev diary for the Tinto maps, is really, really good. They actually show exactly the routes in a map later down in this dev diary, and we're going to talk about that more. But just take a good look at how important the Atlas Mountains are in this entire playthrough, right? Like, the Marinids have nothing to fear because the Atlas Mountains protect them from everybody. The only issue they have is with Tlemcen, their neighbor, which likely is going to be split between them and the Tunisians, or the Hafsids, right? Whatever you want to call them. I do think that the option of choosing whether you want to see Morocco or Marinids or Tunis or Hafsids on the map is important, right? Because personally, I'd rather see Hafsids than seeing Tunis over here, because Tunis wouldn't be as relevant as being the Hafsids in the 1300s at least. I love how Fezzan is literally just a couple of oases over here. That's gonna make for some very interesting playthroughs. If they play their cards right, Fezzan can literally just hide away and play insanely tall and just spring out of the freaking desert with 1,000 trillion billion income and just conquer the world. I'm just kidding. That's never gonna happen. But I'm sure they're gonna have some dates, eh? I'm pretty sure they're gonna have a lot of dates here. That is where dates come from, right? North Africa? They're all over the Middle East. I don't know where exactly they come from. We have a little bit of a sneak peek in the north here into Iberia. Nothing changed. Just wanted to point out that we do have the mountains in the south here in Granada, and the Marinids taking the foothold into Iberia. As I said in the Iberian dev diary, where I talked a lot about the history of this, they did get pushed out just a little bit after the start date. So technically, if we're gonna play it historically, and if there's gonna be events to make it historical, then they should be kicked out within just a few years from Iberia. Or if there's a player on Iberia, they're probably gonna get fully annexed by Iberia. I do like the map without the Terra Incognita separate, because it makes the countries look a lot better though. A lot more uniform and a lot more easy to see the name. Like, look at the difference here. The name is so small and then just like a small little corner, and this is just a proper name spread out, so that's good. The main power in this period is the Marinid dynasty of Morocco, ruling from Fas. After grabbing the power from the Almohads almost a century ago, they start at war with the Zionids of Tlemcen, and its capital is close to falling to the mighty Sultan Abu al-Hassan Ali. They also have a foothold in Iberia around Algeciras and Ronda, which may lead to future campaigns against about the control of the Straits of Gibraltar. We see the diplomatic map mode here. They do start at war with Tlemcen, not at war with the Iberian Castilians, though, Tlemcen's capital is all about to fall, and yeah, Morocco is going to have an easy game there for sure. Now, speaking of Ronda, because Ronda was mentioned, this is what that place looks like. It is honestly one of the most beautiful places around. If you guys ever visit Spain, you should add Ronda to your list of places to visit, because it is beautiful, guys. This is the dynasty map: Marinid, Zionid, Hafsid, and Skibidi Boo in Tripoli, as we talked before. Right, it's Skibidi Boo. This is the location map, and we've got quite a lot of locations, actually, surprisingly, especially by the coastline in the north. There's a buttload of them in Morocco. A lot less as you progress into the mountainous areas, and then also less in the oases. Like Timi Moon here has the same size as all of northern Morocco has for some reason. So yeah, oasis wise, there's like how many, 15 or so locations all the way down to sub-Sahara, so not really that many. This is the Tunisian and Tlemceni area too. We've got Tunis city itself over here next to Badouber Badaba, Nabil, Kiblia, and Hamam, and yeah, Sasa, all the other famous Tunisian places nobody ever heard of. Now, you might be convinced that I'm working for the tourist department of Tunis. I'm not, though. I just want to mention that you should visit if you ever go to Tunis, Sidi Bou Said. It's one of the most beautiful places around. Just amazing. The colors are pretty much white and blue for all of the buildings. They're like really historic buildings, really awesome buildings. And the views are amazing. You see this whole bay over here. It is just insane, the freaking views. Actually insane. I don't think we can find a good one on... Oh yeah, we can. Look at that. Look how awesome that is, dude. Looks way better in person. This dude clearly does know how to take pictures. And also right next to Sidi Bou Said, you have a lot of ruins of Carthage. The city of Carthage was basically this area I'm highlighting right now, this entire area. This is the old Punic port of Carthage, the Kothon, which is super famous. Everybody knows about this if you play EU4 or if you play any historical games. This over here is the Baths of Antoninus. It's really well preserved. Not sure if people still take baths over here, but when I visited Tunis like 10 years ago, when I visited the first time, 12 years ago, oh my god, I'm old. I remember I saw inscriptions in Latin around this place, and I was so freaking hyped to see, you know, like Latin in the middle of freaking, obviously it was a Roman colony for like 600 years, right? Well, actually more if we put the Byzantine period, but it's just something you don't expect to see in a country as foreign to us as Tunis would be, right? It's really amazing. And like some of the stuff in Carthage is extremely well preserved. I strongly recommend you guys check out Tunis if you ever have a chance. It's super cheap as well. Now back to the dev diary. This is what the provinces look like. We've got Castir as one of the bigger ones. We have Fas, Temesna, Habat, Erif, Garet. I actually want to know from Tunisians and Moroccans and Algerians, what do you guys think about the provinces? Is this so accurate? Is it a lot of provinces? Is it too few? I think this is a good amount of provinces, because end of the day, North Africa was a lot less populated than most parts of Europe or Egypt was, for that matter, during this time period, right? We also have the areas map mode, and we have Al-Maghrebri Al-Awsat, Al-Maghrib Ad-Adna, and Al-Maghrib Ad-Aqsa. See, I perfectly pronounced that, by the way. That's because I got 8% North African DNA. I genuinely do have North African DNA 8%, so clearly I need to learn the language. The areas of the Maghreb correspond to their historical divisions: Aqsa, Awasat, Adna, and Tripoli. The northern section of the Sahara is split into two areas, the Western Sahara and the Sahara Oasis. This is the terrain map mode. We've got mostly Mediterranean by the coast, cold arid around the mountainous areas and the hilly areas, and then we have arid obviously around the Sahara itself, with actually a little bit of continental in what I would assume is plateaus or in between the plateaus and the mountains here. Obviously pretty much all flatlands with the exception of the hills and the mountains in the Atlas, and in Tunis as well there's quite a bit of mountains actually and plateaus. Obviously Sahara is one big desert, but something that a lot of people will find surprising is there's forest, there's grasslands, there's farmlands in the north by the coastline. North Africa is actually surprisingly similar to Europe in its climate. I mean really surprisingly similar to Europe. I remember going in winter to Tunis when I visited for the first time, and the weather was basically identical to what it's like back home in Romania. It was pretty cold. Now here we have probably one of the more interesting parts of the dev diary, the culture map mode. So let's take a good look at this here. Before we do, let's actually see what Pavia has to say. Cultural division of the region is very, very interesting, we think. I fully agree. The first thing that I want to stress out is that we've divided the most Arabized zones from the more traditional Berber ones. That is really good. The more Arabized cultures are the Moroccan, Algerian, Tunisian, Libyan, and the Hassaniya tribe in the west part of Sahara. Meanwhile, the Berber speaking peoples are divided into Masmuda, Haja and San Haja in Maghrebi al-Aqsa, the Zenati in the central part, the Kabylian, Chaui, and Mozabit in Al-Adna, and the Eastern Berber, and a name that will probably be changing given feedback already received in the Egyptian Tinto map in Tripoli. The Berber-speaking Tuareg and Saharan-speaking Tubu inhabit the central Saharan oases. So all of these bits here that we see are going to be, well, actually all of these bits here that we see are going to be inhabited by them. This is Zenatis here, this is Hassaniyas here. So to give a brief history of North Africa was conquered by the Arabs towards the end of the 7th century, so roughly 700 years prior to the start date of EU5. When it got conquered by the Arabs, the cultural makeup of North Africa was mostly Latin-speaking Romans. Despite being a part of the Byzantine Empire, as we call it, it was still the Roman Empire, and at the time, the Exarchate of Africa had predominantly Latin speakers as well as Neo-Punic speakers too. That is a newer version of the old Punic from the Carthaginians. It was a mixture of Latin with Punic with other influences, of course, and there was of course also a ton of Berbers. Now when the Africans got conquered by the Arabs, what happened was the Arabs quickly managed to assert domination over North Africa. They didn't instantly replace everybody because majority of people were still non-Arabs for like 400 or 500 years after the conquest. Only the ruling class was Arabs and most of the armed forces. However, even just a couple hundred years after the conquest of North Africa, we have sources, Arab sources, that depict that the majority of the armed forces in North Africa were locals converted to Islam. We do know that the Latin speakers were the easiest ones to convert to Islam because Christianity at the time was following a lot of different sects, and it was easier to convert the Christians in the cities, so the Latin speakers and the Neo-Punic speakers in the cities, to Christianity. The Berbers were also Christians following different types of Christianity. They were significantly harder to convert to Christianity though. We do know that by the 9th century and even up to 11th century, majority of Berbers were still Christians. It was up until the Almohads started doing insanely disgusting things, massive persecutions of Christians, mass conversions, genocides, murders, martyrdoms all over the place. That is just a couple hundred years prior, well actually 100 years prior to 1337 this was happening. But we do know that that did not convert everybody to Islam. There would still be 30 to 40% of the Berber population following Christianity. And also fun fact about the Berbers, the reason that the Berbers are called Berbers, they don't call themselves Berbers. They were called Berbers by the Romans, the Latin speakers. It's actually Barbar. The Romans had a tendency of calling anybody that was not Roman or Greek Barbar. That means that was more specifically a term given to the Germanic speakers because their languages sounded like ba 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 when they spoke. And the Vandals that conquered North Africa prior to the Romans reconquering it, they were of Germanic origin. So what the Romans did is they called everybody here that was not Roman Barbar, barbarians. And in Arabic, I'm pretty sure they also called them Barbar or Berber or something of the sort. And in English, we also call them the same. However, they have a lot of different denominations. Some of them are dark skinned, some of them are blonde with blue eyes, descendants from the Vandal German Berbers. Some of them are, and almost all of them today, well, 98% of them today follow some form of Islam. But that is not the case in 1300s. Far from it. Now, I like to see how they showed the difference between the Arabicized North Africans and the Berber background North Africans, because especially in the 1300s, you would have significantly more Berber North Africans. Well, I guess it would be around 48 to 50 something percent difference between the two of them, right? And yes, I don't know how many of you guys agree with this, but I think this is pretty accurate from a cultural perspective. It was a slow process of consolidating these cultures in North Africa, that's for sure. Pavia says that most of the region's population practices Sunni Islam, with a very important zone where Ibadism is the majority, more or less corresponding with the Mozabite and Eastern Berber. Although it's not shown on the map, there are two religious minorities present: the Mustaravi Jews in a bunch of urban centers across the region, and some native Christians spread all around Al-Maghrib Al-Adna. So personally, I would say maybe 20% of the population should be following Christianity, still roughly around the mountainous areas, and pretty much all of them Berbers, because the previous Christians were converted to Islam, converted to Arabic speaking and everything a long time ago. They were very easy to convert, but the Berbers were not. And the ones that were still Christians would have been in the mountain holdouts. And we actually have an Arab writer, Mohammed Talbi, that says that Berber Christians continued to live in Tunis and Nefzoa in the southern parts of Tunisia until the early 15th century, that is the 1400s. And in the first quarter of the 15th century, that is the early 1400s, he mentions that the native Christians of Tunis, there were still some Christians in Tunis city, extended their church because there was an influx of Christians from other parts of the Maghreb that came to Tunis as a result of persecution in the early 1400s by the various Islamic Maghrebi kingdoms. Now, if you want to see exactly where I got that from, go ahead and read Le Christianisme Maghrébin, which is a French book from Toronto written in 1990 by M. Gervers and R. Bikazi, and the pages are 344 to 345. I invite you. That is clear evidence there were still quite a lot of Christians. They quote Mohammed Talbi, and not only that, there's a lot of others that do mention Christians still being around the 1300s. Of course, nobody mentions they were a majority. They were not a majority anywhere, but they were definitely still around in quite a size, because otherwise they wouldn't be mentioned. And not only that, the bishopric of Marrakesh in the Marinid Moroccan area was still around in 1337. This is easy to check if you want to just do a quick Google check. It was only in the 1600s that it got wiped out. That indicates there were Christians in around Marrakesh to such an amount that they would have a bishopric there. Otherwise, it wouldn't exist. There's also a letter from the 14th century, that is the 1300s, which mentions there were still 4 bishoprics in North Africa, amongst which the one in Marrakesh. This is significantly less than the words before, but 4 bishoprics in North Africa means that there were quite a few Christians still in North Africa. This is found in The Last Christians of Northwest Africa, Some Lessons for Orthodoxy Today by Phillips Andrew. Good book, interesting read. And even the famous historian Ibn Khaldun, which is one of the greatest historians in the Arab world, that was born in 1332 in the Hafsid Sultanate, so in modern Tunisia. 1332, basically when our game starts, more or less. And he does mention multiple times that there were still quite a few Christians in North Africa. It mentions how they were basically martyred quite a few times in his lifetime. Anyway, the point is that this map, big no-no. There should be a lot more mixture between Ibadis, Shias, Sunnis, and Christians, in my opinion, in North Africa. Now, the map for raw materials is juicy. We've got, as you would expect, gold and tafilalt, good old tafilalti gold. We got a buttload of everything spread around everywhere, even dyes, even mercury, which begs the question, what are we going to be using mercury for? We got a buttload of dates. All of you EU4 players out there, someone's got to date you. Might as well be a province. Pavia mentions the Maghreb is very rich in different materials, especially Morocco. The Sahara corridor is way less productive, but it's important for the map. Now, the market's all Al-Jazari, Sevilla, and that's it. So Al-Jazari is the majority of the market in North Africa, actually. Population-wise, we got 2 million in the Hafsids, 1 million in the Zionids, and 2.2 in the Marinids, roughly around 5.5 million total. And next week, we're going to see West Africa. That's going to be a really cool one, because this is going to be one of the first times we actually see the African continent south of the Sahara. So I'm pretty hyped for that. Also, Yusuf Ho mentions there should be a large Andalusian diaspora in Maghreb. I actually agree with this. We have, again, multiple sources that mention a lot of Maghrebi colonies of Andalusians coming in from the conquest in Iberia, basically when the Iberian kingdoms were conquering parts of Andalusia. And Muslims from Iberia would flee over into North Africa. So that's also not portrayed. And not only that, there would be Christians fleeing into North Africa from the face of Iberian conquest as well, albeit not as many, probably not that many to even portray on the map, but still, there were a small amount of those too. That's about it for this Dev Diary. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Love love you all, and I'll see you in the next one.